All right, welcome back to our read aloud. We are reading Pax today, and we are in the middle of a Peter chapter that was quite long. All right, the last thing we talked about, we know that Peter is back at Vola's house. She has 3 rules or 3 conditions that he has to follow. Does anyone remember the first rule? Non-negotiable rule? Hayden? The first rule, just to remind you guys, she said you have to let your grandpa know you're okay, right? I can't have him worrying that you're dead in a ditch. What was the second rule, Cadence? Do you remember? Zoe? He had to tell her what something meant. Something in his bag.
Oh, the bracelet.
Yes, he's got his mom's bracelet. Do you think he's going to want to talk about that with Vola? No. He seems pretty private about that. The third condition, she wants him to help her with something. We don't know what it is, but he has to or she will not help him. Alex?
And you were talking about she won't help him. Now I think she wants to find her fox, the same thing as him.
Could be. All right. Okay. Inside the cabin was bright and smelled faintly of smoke. Vola tapped a pine table and Peter sat. She draped a blanket over his shoulders, then left and came back with a plastic bag full of ice cubes. She propped his foot on a chair and wedged the ice bag against it. With a washcloth, she cleaned the blood from his hand. Finally, she passed him a cutting board with a loaf of bread and a knife on it. Peter put it down. How long will it take? Depends on you. The woman pointed to the bread. What, you can't use your hands either? Slice that up. How long? You can go when you can hike over rough terrain on those crutches for 8 hours a day. 2 weeks, I'd guess. 6 slices. You don't understand. He won't survive. Vola lowered her head to glare at Peter. She yanked her thumb to the wall behind him. Number 11. Peter twisted around. A jumble of index cards were thumbtacked to the wall. The Gulf Stream will flow through a straw, provided the straw is aligned to the Gulf Stream and not at cross currents. He read aloud from the one with an 11 scrawled over it. What's that supposed to mean? It means align yourself, boy. Align yourself? Figure out how things are and accept it. You've got a broken foot. Broken. The deal is, you stay until I say you're ready. I told you. My conscience is stretched to its limit. So that's your choice. Stay here until I say, or go back to your grandfather's now. You change your mind about that? No, but then accept it, eh? Now slice the diableman bread. Diableman is this crazy word she always uses. It's almost like a replacement for a cuss word or something, but she always says diableman. Peter started to argue, but then closed his mouth. He wasn't staying for any 2 weeks, but obedient and helpful was the safest play for now. He ducked his head and set to work cutting 6 thick, even slices of bread, while Vola slapped a chunk of butter onto an iron skillet and snapped on a flame beneath it. Without turning around, she motioned to a shelf above the counter. Pick yourself something. Canning jars stacked 3 deep gleamed like a rainbow of liquid jewels along the length of the shelf. Peter read the plain block letters on the labels. Cherries, plums, tomatoes, blueberries, apples, pumpkin, pears, green beans, beets, peaches. Braids of dried garlic and chili peppers hung beside the shelf. You grow all this? Vola nodded, her back still to him. All right, why would people, now a long time ago, my grandma used to do this, even my mom when I was a kid. Do you know why people can things into mason jars? Does anyone know? Zoe, what do you think?
So they don't go bad.
Right, so they don't go bad. And the cool part, you don't have to put them in the refrigerator. So if you can stuff, you make a tight seal and kind of use pressure to seal it in. Because do you think she has a refrigerator way out here in the middle of the woods?
No.
Maybe not. So she's got all her food canned. The trees that run along your stone wall are in bloom. What are they? Nearest the wall? Peaches. He pointed to a jar near the end. Peaches, he said. Please, ma'am. Vola opened a jar and handed him a fork. There's a twig in it or something. Vola reached into the jar, popped the stick into her mouth, sucked the syrup off, pitched the stick over her shoulder into the sink, and rolled her eyes. Lord, cinnamon, eat! She gathered the bread he'd cut with a curt nod of approval. Cheddar or Swiss? Madeline? You can go let it out in the hall. Cheddar, I guess. Vola straightened. You guess, boy? You don't know? Peter shrugged and speared a peach chunk. It tasted as bright and golden as it looked. All right, now what's he been eating before he got this meal? He's not been eating very good. Hayden, what's he been eating on the trail?
He's been eating, like, berries and stuff.
What did he pack from his grandpa's? He had a few things to eat. Cadence? He maybe had a sandwich. I know that he had crackers, and he had some string cheese, and he had peanut butter, and that's about all he had. So he's probably ready for a good meal. Eric?
He had raisins, too.
Yes, he did have raisins. All right, so now he's eating fresh peaches that are sweet, so they probably taste really good. Vola seemed to be working up a whole lot more to say about the cheese issue, but then she pressed her lips together, spun around on the point of her wooden leg, and clumped out the back door. She came back in with a slab of cheese a moment later, then set to work wordlessly making sandwiches. Peter heard them sizzle as she pressed them into the hot skillet. He surveyed the cabin. It wasn't big, but it didn't feel cramped either. Sunlight flooded in through clean windows, washing the log walls in a honey glow. 2 blue-striped armchairs flanked a stone fireplace, and a trunk stacked with books served as a table between them. Small barrels held lanterns, and more hung from the beams. There were photos on the mantel, a few paintings on the walls, and a basket of yarn beside the armchair. Through an open door by the fireplace, Peter saw the corner of a bed, neatly made with a yellow-checked quilt. It was a surprisingly normal home for a crazy person, yet something was missing. Peter noticed how quiet it was, silent actually, except for bird calls outside and the butter sputtering in the skillet. But that wasn't it. Not exactly. Hey, he said as it dawned on him, you don't have electricity. The woman flipped the sandwiches. As far as I know, that's not a crime in this country. Not yet, anyway. Peter tried to think of what he would miss without electricity, but there were too many things to count. He chased out the last bit of peach, the fork rattling against the empty jar. Vola's back was still turned to him, so he lifted the jar to drain the last drops of syrup. But wait, how'd you get the ice? I've got a refrigerator out on the porch. It's gas. So are the stove and water heater. I've got everything I need. So if your house doesn't run on electricity, which she does not have, you can use gas, which we've been learning about natural gas in Indiana. So natural gas is actually what heats some of my house. So you either have gas or electric or a combo of both. So she's got some natural gas. She set 2 blue plates down on the table. Peter's mouth watered at the smell of the food, but he waited. Vola wasn't finished, he sensed. I have more than everything I need, Vola sat. I have peace here. Because it's so quiet? No, because I am exactly where I should be, doing exactly what I should be doing. That is peace. Eat. Peter bit into his sandwich. The cheese was hot and runny all the way through, the bread fried crisp and brown. He broke off a corner out of force of habit and was about to reach down with it when he remembered. There was no fox under the table. He wondered if Pax was missing him as much as he missed his fox right now. Don't you get lonely out here? I see people. B. Booker, librarian. Robert Johnson, bus driver. I see people. She got up, brought the frying pan over, and slid another sandwich onto his plate. Eat. Peter ate, thinking about what she'd said about peace. When he finished, he licked the buttery crumbs from his fingers. What do you mean you're doing exactly what you should be doing? Do you work? Of course I work. The garden is 1/2 an acre and the orchard is twice that size. I'm planting beans and okra today. Maybe get to replacing the seal on the well pump. There's always plenty to do here. But you don't go to a job, make any money? How do you buy things? Like all those tools in the barn, like... He waved around the cabin. All your stuff. Vola hoisted herself onto the counter and then held out her wooden leg and wrapped it with the spatula. My country pays me a little blood money every month in exchange for my leg. What'd she mean by that? What do you guys think? Hayden?
She's a pay a lot for it.
Well, so she was in the service, okay? I think we read that earlier. Did we already knew that? Like in the military. At one point, Vola was in the military. So, If you lose a limb in the military or get injured really badly while you're fighting for our country in the war, the government will take care of you, right? It wouldn't make any sense if you serve our country and then they don't take care of you. So she gets a check every month from the government to help her and her disability, okay? So that's the money she says she's living on. She dropped the spatula into the sink and shook her head. A Diableman deal. Turns out my leg wasn't all that valuable to them. Wish they'd told me that before they sent me scouting in a minefield. Because I liked my leg. It was a good leg. Not much to look at maybe, but it worked fine. It ran me clear into the next town when Deirdre Callanan and I set fire to her father's woodshed in 6th grade. And it kicked the smile off Henry Valentine's face when he tried to grab me next year. I could go on. A leg is a very big price to pay. Every day, every single day. I wish I had it back. Hi, you can just set those right there in the corner. Thank you, sir. How come you don't get one that's more... The woman stuck her leg out again and tugged up her cuff to assess the wooden post. Oh, they gave me a prosthetic, a complicated piece of work. Scared the devil out of me whenever I looked down, so I made my own. It's heavy and it's clumsy, but I did some terrible things in the war. I figure I deserve to drag something around. Do you think she feels guilty about what she had to do in the war?
Yeah.
So it's almost like she's punishing herself by having to drag this heavy leg.
Why is he punishing herself?
Shh. Too many people talked out at once. Shh. Noah.
Why is he punishing herself?
Well, I think she feels guilty. Like, if you have to go to war, sometimes you have to do things for your country that you wouldn't necessarily want to do, right? War can be a pretty upsetting, terrible thing. So I think they gave her a prosthetic. Does anyone know what that is?
Yeah.
Quentin, what's a prosthetic?
It's like a leg, but it's like kind of like a robot leg.
Yeah, it looks like a robot leg. It's nice and metal and it works well. But she's not using that. She made her own out of a hunk of wood. And that's why it's kind of like she's punishing herself. Do you think that one's less comfortable?
Yeah.
Yeah. Alex?
Mother's not working.
Okay, I'll have to get you one later.
What does devil mean?
The way she was using it, it's just an expression. If someone scares the devil out of you, it's an expression that, like, you were real scared.
Oh.
All right. We've got a little bit more time to read. I lost my spot. Okay. I figure I deserve to drag something around. You threw it away? A prosthetic leg? You just threw it away? Peter couldn't help imagining the shocked look on some garbage collector's face. Of course not. I wear it. Sometimes. Right now it's in the garden on the scarecrow. Scares the devil out of the crows too, apparently. Must be a phrase she likes. She dropped off the counter and jammed a battered straw hat onto her head as if she suddenly remembered this garden of hers. I'll be back before dark. The outhouse is just beyond the 2 cedars, and there's a tub in the kitchen. Clean up. The porch is yours. Actually, you'll have to share it with Frances. Keep that leg elevated. Who's Frances? Again, Vola's short bark of a laugh startled Peter. She tipped her head toward the back door, which led out to the screened porch. He's probably out there napping right now, lazy old thief. She crossed to the door, looked out, and then nodded. Come see. Peter levered himself off the chair and into the crutches. Vola held the door open and waved toward a wood bin. Peter saw a pair of dark, ringed eyes peering out at him. He cocked his head to get a better view, and the raccoon cocked his head back. Francis Villain, named after one of the most famous thieves in history. The original was a poet as well as a thief, and such a charmer that every time they arrested him, some admirer pardoned him. Peter grinned. He crouched to get a better look. Hey, Chuck, 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 he called softly, the way he always greeted Pax in the morning. The raccoon eyed him lazily for another moment, then seemed to decide he wasn't interesting, and flopped over and closed his eyes. Is he wild or tame? Vola waved the words off as if they were gnats. I leave the porch door open. He visits when he wants to, and he's fine company. I feed him, but I don't have to. He stays fat enough on his own. We've come to a little agreement about the chicken coop. He leaves the girls alone, and I scramble him up an egg every now and then. He's a companion. That's the best word. She pointed to a beam spanning the ceiling. Tomorrow you can do some pull-ups, but today, stay off the leg and keep it elevated. Above your heart is best. She nodded to the refrigerator. Keep icing on it too, off and on. I want the swelling down so I can set the bone tonight. Mix a spoonful of willow bark and water every few hours for pain. Peter nodded, then dropped into the hammock hanging from the beams, exhausted. Vola started to leave, but paused in the doorway and turned around to study him. She crossed her arms over her chest, an unreadable expression on her face. What? Just wondering, she said. You staying out here on the porch. What do you suppose that makes you? Wild or tame? And that's the end of chapter 12. All right, next time we'll check back in with Pax. I will see you all later.